Have you ever noticed how the most giving people often carry the heaviest burdens? Look around this room. I bet every single one of you knows someone, maybe it's even you, who's always there for others, always saying yes, always putting everyone else first. We celebrate these people, don't we? We call them saints, angels among us. But today I want to talk about something that might make you uncomfortable. Something that's been weighing on my heart for years. The dark side of being too kind. You see, just last week, I sat across from a woman who hadn't slept in 3 days. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands trembling as she held her coffee cup. "I just can't say no," she whispered. "Everyone needs me. My children, my aging parents, my colleagues, my neighbors. I feel like I'm drowning, but how can I stop helping when so many people depend on me?" Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. Because in that moment, I realized something profound. Sometimes our greatest virtue can become our greatest prison. Think about oxygen masks on airplanes. What do they tell us? Put your own mask on first before helping others. Yet how many of us do the exact opposite in life? We give and give and give until we're gasping for air, telling ourselves it's the right thing to do, the good thing to do. But here's the truth that nobody talks about. When kindness becomes a cage, it stops being kindness. Let me share something personal with you. For years, I watched my closest friend pour herself into every relationship, every friendship, every workplace interaction. She was the first to volunteer, the last to leave, the shoulder everyone cried on. People called her an angel. But behind closed doors, she was crumbling. Her health was deteriorating, her dreams were gathering dust, and her own life was passing her by while she lived everyone else's. One day she collapsed. Not metaphorically. Literally collapsed in her office. Her body finally did what her mind couldn't. It forced her to stop. And you know what the most heartbreaking part was? When she finally had to step back to heal, most of those people she'd sacrificed everything for, they simply found someone else to lean on. Her sacrifices hadn't saved them. They'd only destroyed her. This is where we need to have an honest conversation about the difference between genuine kindness and self-destructive people-pleasing. True kindness comes from a place of wholeness, not hollowness. It comes from a cup that's overflowing, not one that's been scraped dry. But how many of us have been conditioned to believe that self-sacrifice equals virtue, that saying no is selfish, that putting ourselves last is somehow noble? These beliefs are like invisible chains that keep us bound to patterns that slowly destroy. I want you to think about something for a moment. Close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. Think about the last time you said yes when every fiber of your being was screaming no. Remember how it felt in your body. That tightness in your chest, that knot in your stomach, that voice in your head begging you to protect your own peace, your own time, your own energy. Why did you ignore it? We've been taught that kindness means always being available, always saying yes, always putting others first. But let me tell you something revolutionary. True kindness includes being kind to yourself. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and others is to say no. When we give from an empty cup, we're not really giving at all. We're operating from a place of depletion, resentment, and often hidden anger. Yes, hidden anger. Because there's another dark truth about being too kind. We say yes with our mouths while our hearts are screaming in protest. And the disconnect creates a poison that slowly infects all our relationships. Think about it. How many times have you agreed to help someone, then found yourself bitter about it later? How many times have you sacrificed your own needs only to feel resentful toward the very people you're helping? That's not kindness. That's self-imposed martyrdom. And it serves no one. But there's an even darker side to this pattern. When we're too kind, when we consistently override our own boundaries and needs, we don't just hurt ourselves. We enable others to remain dependent, weak, and irresponsible. Our excessive kindness can actually stunt the growth of the very people we're trying to help. It's like the story of the butterfly struggling to emerge from its cocoon. If you, in your kindness, decide to help it by cutting open the cocoon, you've actually condemned that butterfly to death. Because it's the very struggle of breaking free that strengthens its wings enough to fly. When we rush to solve everyone's problems, shoulder everyone's burdens, and smooth everyone's path, we deny them the crucial life experiences they need to develop their own strengths, resilience, and problem-solving abilities. Let's talk about the workplace for a moment. How many of you are the go-to person in your office? The one who stays late to help others finish their work? The one who takes on extra projects because nobody else will do it right? The one who's drowning in responsibilities while watching others leave on time, take vacations, and maintain healthy boundaries? You might think you're being kind, being helpful, being a team player. But let me ask you this. What if your excessive kindness is actually enabling a dysfunctional system? What if your willingness to always pick up the slack is allowing others to remain incompetent or lazy? What if your kindness is actually perpetuating workplace inequality? These are uncomfortable questions, aren't they? They should be. Because the dark side of being too kind isn't just about what it does to us. It's about what it does to the entire ecosystem of our relationships, our workplaces, our families, and our community. But here's where it gets even more complex. Many of us use excessive kindness as a shield, a way to avoid conflict, a method of keeping people happy so they won't abandon us. We've learned, sometimes very early in life, that being endlessly giving and accommodating is the price we must pay for love and acceptance. But let me tell you something. If people only stick around because you're constantly sacrificing yourself for them, that's not love. That's exploitation. Real love, real connection, real relationships, they thrive on authenticity, not endless accommodation. They grow stronger through healthy boundaries, not boundless giving. They deepen through mutual respect, not one-sided sacrifice. I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine a world where your kindness flows from a place of genuine choice rather than compulsion, where your yes means something because you also know how to say no, where you can be generous without being self-destructive, caring without being consumed. This isn't just a fantasy. It's possible. But to get there, we need to understand that being too kind isn't really kindness at all. It's often fear dressed up as virtue, fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough just as we are. And until we face these fears, our kindness will continue to be a beautifully decorated prison. So how do we break free from this pattern? How do we transform our relationship with kindness so it empowers rather than depletes us? The journey begins with a fundamental shift in how we view ourselves and our worth. You see, many of us have bought into a dangerous myth that our worth is measured by how much we give, how much we sacrifice, how much we suffer in service of others. We've internalized the belief that saying no makes us bad people, that taking care of ourselves is selfish, that having boundaries means we're unkind. The most profound act of kindness you can offer the world is to first be kind to yourself. Because when you're operating from a place of wholeness rather than depletion, your kindness becomes a gift rather than a burden. Think about the people you most admire, the ones who've truly made a difference in the world. Did they achieve what they did by saying yes to everyone and everything, by burning themselves out, by sacrificing their own well-being? They understood something crucial, that sustainable impact requires sustainable practice. I want you to imagine a beautiful garden. If you constantly allow others to trample through it, to pick every flower as soon as it blooms, to drain every resource without giving anything back, what happens? The garden dies. Your energy, your time, your emotional well-being, these are your garden. And you are the gardener. It's not just your right, but your responsibility to protect and nurture this garden. Setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others. It's about saying yes to yourself, yes to your dreams, yes to your health, yes to your peace of mind, yes to your right to exist as more than just a resource for others to drain. But here's where many of us get stuck. We understand this intellectually, but when the moment comes to actually set a boundary, to say no, to prioritize our own needs, we freeze. The guilt rushes in, the fear takes over. The old patterns reassert themselves. This is where we need to understand something profound about guilt. Guilt is not a moral compass. Let me repeat that. Guilt is not a moral compass. It's often just the resistance of old patterns fighting to survive. It's the voice of outdated programming telling us we're bad for taking care of ourselves. When you start setting healthy boundaries, when you begin prioritizing your own well-being, people around you might react negatively. They've grown accustomed to your endless availability, your constant sacrifice, your boundless giving. Their resistance to your growth is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's often a sign that you're finally doing something right. People who get angry at your boundaries are the ones who benefited from you having none. When you start honoring your own boundaries, when you begin filling your own cup first, you actually become more capable of genuine kindness. Not the depleted, resentful, martyred kind of giving, but real, joyful, energized generosity. When you're on an airplane and there's turbulence, you don't want a flight attendant who's exhausted, burned out, and running on empty. You want someone who's well-rested, clear-headed, and fully present. The same applies to every area of your life. The world doesn't need your exhaustion and martyrdom. It needs your energy, your joy, your full presence. This brings us to another crucial understanding. The quality of your no determines the quality of your yes. When you learn to say no to what drains you, you create space to say yes to what truly matters. When you stop spreading yourself thin, trying to be everything to everyone, you can be something meaningful to the people and causes that truly align with your values and purpose. Let's talk about what this looks like in practice. It starts with small moments of courage. The courage to pause before automatically saying yes. The courage to check in with yourself. Does this align with my values? Do I have the energy for this? What am I saying no to by saying yes to this? These questions might feel foreign at first. You might even feel selfish for asking them, but remember, selfish is not the opposite of kind. Sometimes what looks like selfishness to others is actually self-preservation, and you cannot serve from an empty vessel. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. When you say yes to staying late at work again, you might be saying no to time with your family. When you say yes to helping someone with their crisis, you might be saying no to dealing with your own. When you say yes to being everyone's emotional support, you might be saying no to your own emotional healing. This isn't about becoming cold or unavailable. It's about becoming intentional with your kindness. It's about transforming from a martyr to a conscious giver. From someone who gives until they're empty to someone who gives from their overflow. What if your excessive kindness is actually a form of control? Or by always being the helper, the giver, the savior, you're actually keeping others dependent on you. What if your need to be needed is preventing others from developing their own strength and resilience? These are challenging questions, but they're essential ones. Because true kindness, the kind that uplifts both the giver and the receiver, comes from a place of empowerment, not enablement. It comes from seeing others as capable beings who can handle their own struggles, not as helpless victims who need constant rescue. This is where the real transformation begins. When we start to understand that being kind doesn't mean being available 24/7. That being helpful doesn't mean solving everyone's problems. That being loving doesn't mean sacrificing our own well-being. Imagine the relief in finally putting down the heavy burden of being everything to everyone. Imagine the freedom in knowing that you can be a kind person and still have boundaries. Imagine the peace in understanding that other people's reactions to your boundaries are not your responsibility to manage. This is the path to sustainable kindness. To kindness that doesn't deplete you. To kindness that comes from a place of genuine choice rather than compulsion. To kindness that enhances rather than diminishes your life. But this path requires courage. The courage to disappoint people in the short term for the sake of long-term authenticity. The courage to face the discomfort of change. The courage to trust that those who truly love you will adjust to your healthy boundaries and those who don't. Well, perhaps they only loved what you could do for them, not who you truly are. Now, let's talk about what happens when we begin this journey of transformation. Because make no mistake, this is a journey that will test everything you believe about yourself. It's a journey that will bring up deep-seated fears and long-buried truths. When you first start setting boundaries, when you begin saying no, when you start prioritizing your own well-being, it feels wrong. It feels selfish. Your hands might shake, your voice might quiver, your heart might race. This is normal. This is part of the process. Think about a muscle that's never been used. When you first start exercising it, it feels uncomfortable. It might even hurt. But with consistent use, it gets stronger. Setting boundaries, saying no, prioritizing yourself, these are emotional muscles that many of us have never developed. Of course, they feel uncomfortable at first. As you continue this journey, as you keep exercising these new emotional muscles, something remarkable happens. You start to feel different, not just in your actions, but in your the guilt begins to fade. The anxiety lessens. The need to please everyone starts to loosen its grip. And something else happens too, something that might surprise you. The quality of your relationships begins to change. Yeah, some people might fall away. The ones who were only there for what you could give them, the ones who loved your boundaryless self, they might just let them. Because what replaces these relationships is something far more valuable. Authentic connections built on mutual respect, genuine care, and healthy boundaries. When you stop being a doormat, you start attracting people who don't want to walk all over you. This brings us to a crucial understanding about relationships. Many of us who struggle with being too kind of a fundamental misconception about love and connection. We believe that to be loved, we must be needed. That to matter, we must be useful. That to belong, we must be indispensable. Being needed is not the same as being loved. Being useful is not the same as being valued. Being indispensable is not the same as being cherished. Real love, genuine connection. These things flourish in the soil of authenticity, not utility. When you stop being everyone's emotional support system, when you stop being the go-to person for every crisis, when you stop being the universal problem solver, you create space for people to love you for who you are, not what you can do for them. Think about that for a moment. How many of your current relationships are based on what you do for others rather than who you are? How many people in your life know the real you? Not just the helpful, accommodating, always available version of you, but the full spectrum of who you are. This is where the real work begins, because being too kind isn't just a behavior. It's often a mask we wear to hide our authentic selves. We use endless giving as a way to make ourselves acceptable, to make ourselves worthy. You don't need to earn your place in the world through endless giving. You don't need to justify your existence through constant sacrifice. You don't need to prove your worth through perpetual availability. Your worth is intrinsic. It exists independent of what you do for others. It remains intact even when you say no. It persists even when you disappoint people. It endures even when you put yourself. This understanding, this deep soul-level recognition of your inherent worth, this is what transforms your relationship with kindness. Because when you know your worth isn't dependent on how much you give, you can give from a place of genuine choice rather than desperate need. Let's talk about what this looks like in practice. It starts with small moments of truth-telling. When someone asks you to do something, pause, take a breath, check in with yourself. Do I really want to do this? Do I have the energy for this? What would saying yes cost me? And here's the crucial part. Be honest with yourself about the answers. No more pushing down your true feelings. No more ignoring your inner wisdom. No more overriding your own needs for the sake of others' comfort. I need to think about it. That doesn't work for me. I don't have the capacity for that right now. I value our relationship, but I can't take that on. Simple words, but for many of us, they feel like moving mountains. But remember this, every time you honor your own truth, every time you set a healthy boundary, every time you say no to what doesn't serve you, you're not just changing your own life. You're setting an example for others. You're showing them what healthy relationships look like. You're demonstrating what sustainable kindness feels. Think about the ripple effects of your transformation. When you stop being the person who says yes to everything, you give others permission to do the same. When you start taking care of yourself, you show others that self-care isn't selfish. When you set healthy boundaries, you teach others how to respect their own limits. This is how real change happens. Not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through consistent, small acts of self-respect and authentic living. They wait for permission. They wait for the perfect moment. They wait until they feel ready. But here's the truth. You'll never feel completely ready to transform your relationship with kindness. You'll never feel totally prepared to set boundaries. You'll never feel entirely confident in saying no. The key is to start anyway, to take small steps even when your knees are shaking, to set boundaries even when your voice quivers, to prioritize yourself even when guilt screams in your ear. Those small steps add up. Those tiny acts of courage accumulate. Those moments of choosing yourself begin to create a new pattern, a new way of being in the world. And gradually something remarkable occurs. The guilt begins to lose its power. The fear of disappointment others starts to fade. The need to please everyone loosens its grip. You start to feel more solid in your own skin, more confident in your choices, more peaceful in your decisions. As we continue this journey together, let's explore something that rarely gets discussed: the profound ripple effects that occur when you transform your relationship with kindness. Because this isn't just about learning to say no or setting boundaries. This is about fundamentally changing how you show up in the world. Think about a stone dropped into a still pond. The ripples move outward, touching everything. When you begin to practice healthy kindness, kindness with boundaries, kindness with self-respect, kindness with wisdom, you create ripples that affect every aspect of your life and touch everyone around you. When you stop being the person who can never say no, who always puts others first, who constantly sacrifices their own well-being, you give others a precious gift. You show them that it's possible to be both kind and strong, both giving and boundaried, both compassionate and self-respecting. But here's where it gets really interesting. As you transform, you'll notice something fascinating happening in your relationships. Some people will resist your change fiercely. They'll try to push you back into your old patterns. They'll use guilt, manipulation, even anger to try to make you return to being their endless resource. This resistance isn't about you. It's about them. It's about their discomfort with change. It's about their fear of losing their reliable source of support. It's about their own unresolved issues with boundaries and self-worth. And this is where many people get stuck. They see this resistance and think they're doing something wrong. They feel the pushback and believe they're being cruel. They experience others as discomfort and rush to return to their old patterns of excessive giving. Here's what you need to understand. This resistance is not a sign that you're on the wrong path. It's often the clearest indication that you're finally on the right one. When you've been the person who always says yes, who never has needs, who's constantly available, you've trained the people around you to expect this from you. You've conditioned them to see you as an endless resource rather than a human being with limits and needs. So when you start changing this dynamic, of course there's going to be resistance. Of course there's going to be pushback. Of course there's going to be discomfort. This is normal. This is necessary. This is part of the process. As you stay steady in your new boundaries, as you remain firm in your self-respect, as you persist in your healthy giving, something remarkable starts to happen. The people who truly care about you begin to adjust. They start to respect your boundaries. They begin to see you as a whole person, not just a source of supply. And those who can't or won't adjust, those who continue to demand your endless giving, those who refuse to respect your boundaries, they begin to fall away naturally. And while this might feel painful at first, it's actually because here's another truth about being too kind. It often attracts people who are looking for someone to use rather than someone to love. When you transform your relationship with kindness, you naturally begin to filter out these energy vampires, these emotional parasites, these takers who mask themselves as people in perpetual need. This filtering process might feel like loss at first. You might see relationships ending and think you're doing something wrong. But remember, not all relationships are meant to last forever. Some people are in your life for a reason, some for a season, and some for a lifetime. The ones who are meant to be in your life will adjust to your healthy boundaries. They'll respect your limits. They'll appreciate your authentic self. They'll value you for who you are, not just what you can do for them. As these inauthentic relationships fall away, you create space for new, healthier connections. You begin to attract people who respect boundaries, who understand reciprocity, who value authentic connection over utility. This is where the real magic happens. Because when you're surrounded by people who respect your boundaries, who honor your limits, who value your authentic self, you naturally become more of who you truly are. You stop hiding behind the mask of endless giving. You start showing up as your full, complex, imperfect, beautiful self. And this authenticity, it's contagious. When you show up as your true self, you give others permission to do the same. When you honor your own boundaries, you teach others how to honor theirs. When you practice healthy kindness, you demonstrate to others what real giving looks like. Think about the impact this could have on the next generation. If you're a parent, imagine what message you're sending to your children when they see you constantly sacrificing yourself, constantly saying yes, constantly putting yourself last. Now imagine what message you could send them by modeling healthy boundaries, self-respect, and authentic. This is how real change happens, not just in our own lives, but in the world around us. When we transform our relationship with kindness, we create a ripple effect that touches everyone we encounter. We become living examples of what's possible when we combine compassion with wisdom, giving with boundaries, love with self-respect. This transformation isn't a destination. It's a journey. You won't wake up one day having perfectly balanced boundaries and completely healthy relationships with giving. This is a practice, a daily choice, a constant learning process. There will be days when you slip back into old patterns, days when guilt wins, days when fear takes over, days when you say yes, when you really want to say no. This is normal, this is human, this is part of the process. The key is not perfection, it's persistence. It's about getting back up when you fall. It's about recommitting to your boundaries when you've let them slip. It's about returning to self-respect when you've forgotten it momentarily. Because the time you choose yourself, every time you set a healthy boundary, every time you practice authentic kindness, you're not just changing your own life, you're contributing to a larger shift in how we understand and practice kindness in our world. Imagine a world where kindness isn't measured by how much we deplete ourselves, but by how authentically we show up. Where giving isn't about sacrifice, but about sharing from our overflow. Where love isn't about erasing ourselves, but about bringing our whole selves to our relationships. As we come to the close of our time together, I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning feeling completely at peace with who you are. Not the endless giver, not the constant people pleaser, not the perpetual problem solver, just you in your authentic, imperfect, beautifully human form. Imagine moving through your day, making choices based on what truly feels right for you, not what you think others expect from you. Imagine saying no without guilt, saying yes with genuine enthusiasm, and feeling completely at peace with both. This isn't just a fantasy. This isn't just a nice idea. This is possible. This is available to you. This is what happens when you transform your relationship with kindness. But here's what you need to understand as you begin this journey. The path to healthy kindness isn't about becoming less giving. It's about becoming more authentic. It's not about closing your heart. It's about opening it wide enough to include yourself. Think about the most genuinely kind people you've ever met. Not the martyrs, not the people pleasers, not the endless givers, but the people whose kindness feels like sunshine. Warm, natural, life. These people aren't kind because they're trying to prove something. They're kind because that's who they are. And crucially, their kindness has boundaries. Their giving has limits. Their compassion includes themselves. This is what we're aiming for. Not the exhausted, resentful, martyred kind of kindness that leaves us empty, but the genuine, joyful, boundaried kind of kindness that fills both the giver and the receiver. The journey of this kind of kindness begins with a simple but profound shift. Start treating yourself with the same kindness you so freely give to others. When you're tired, let yourself rest. When you're overwhelmed, let yourself say no. When you're hurting, let yourself heal. Because here's a truth that might shake you to your core. The way you treat yourself sets the template for how others will treat you. When you consistently override your own needs, you teach others that your needs don't matter. When you constantly sacrifice your own well-being, you teach others that your well-being is optional. But when you start honoring your own boundaries, respecting your own limits, valuing your own peace, you teach others how to do the same. You create a new template for what kindness looks like. You set a new standard for what giving means. This isn't just about you. This is about creating a new paradigm of kindness in our world. One where giving doesn't mean depleting ourselves. One where compassion doesn't mean compromising our boundaries. One where kindness doesn't mean sacrificing our own well-being. Imagine the ripple effects of this transformation. Imagine how it could change your family dynamics, your workplace relationships, your friendships. Imagine how it could influence the next generation, showing them that true kindness comes from wholeness, not the... This is your invitation to step into a new way of being, to release the burden of being everything to everyone, to embrace the freedom of being authentically, imperfectly, powerfully yourself. The world doesn't need more martyrs. It doesn't need more depleted givers. It doesn't need more exhausted heroes. What the world needs is people who have found the courage to be both kind and boundaried, both giving and self-respecting, both compassionate and self-honoring. This is your moment, your opportunity to transform not just your relationship with kindness, but your entire way of being in the world. To step out of the prison of excessive giving and into the freedom of authentic kindness. The path won't always be easy. There will be moments of doubt, moments of guilt, moments when you question everything, but keep going. Keep choosing yourself. Keep setting those boundaries. Keep practicing healthy kindness. Because every time you honor your own boundaries, you create a ripple effect of healthy relationships. Every time you practice authentic kindness, you show others what's possible. Every time you choose both compassion and self-respect, you help create a world where kindness doesn't come at the cost of self-sacrifice. Your transformation begins now, not when you feel ready, not when others approve, not when the guilt subsides, now in this moment, with your next choice, with your next boundary, with your next act of authentic kindness. You are not here to be everyone's everything. You are here to be authentically, powerfully, beautifully yourself. And from that place of authenticity, from that place of wholeness, from that place of self-respect, that's where true kindness flows. Let your kindness be like a river that flows from a full reservoir, not a desert spring being drained dry. Let your giving come from your overflow, not your empty spaces. Let your compassion include yourself, not exclude you. This is your time, your moment, your transformation. The world is waiting for your authentic kindness, your boundary giving, your wholehearted truth. Step into it, embrace it, live it. Because when you transform your relationship with kindness, you don't just change your life, you change the world. One boundary at a time, one authentic choice at a time, one act of healthy kindness at a time. The journey begins now, and it begins with you choosing yourself, not instead of others, but alongside them. Not at the expense of kindness, but as the foundation for true, sustainable, life-giving kindness. Take this moment, take this understanding, take this truth, and let it transform not just how you give, but how you live, because you deserve nothing less than a life where kindness fills you up instead of draining you dry. This is your legacy. Not as the person who gave until there was nothing left, but as the one who showed others what real kindness looks like, the kind that honors both self and others, the kind that creates more life, not less, the kind that changes the world without sacrificing the self. Step into this new way of being. Your authentic self is waiting. Your true power is ready. Your real kindness is about to emerge. The world is ready for your transformed kindness. Are you ready to give it? Thank you.